Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Wolper Wellbeing program, hosted tonight by Wolper Jewish Hospital and Friends of Wolper. And our topic tonight is boosting your immune system, never more important than now. So I'm hoping that you're already feeling activated in an immune sense right from the very word go. My name is Julie McCrossan, and it's my great pleasure to be your host this evening. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're on Aboriginal land and to pay our respects to elders past and present, and also emerging elders. And just a few bits of quick housekeeping. If you're in the audience and people are joining us with great rapidity even as we speak, you cannot be seen or heard. But we really want your questions, and you can start asking them now, to come through the Q&A section on the bottom of the screen. You'll see the Q&A, you just click that, send your questions through there from now on and throughout our session. We will not be using the chat, so please put them through the Q&A. We have a question monitor, Dr. Alan Schell, who I'll introduce you to in just a moment, and he'll be monitoring them and bringing questions to us throughout the night. And we'll do our living best to answer as many questions as we can, but we do have over 355, nearly 360 people registered tonight, so we won't be able to get to all of you, but we'll do our living best. So it gives me great pleasure now to begin by welcoming Dr. Alan Schell. He's a life member of Wolper Jewish Hospital, a local general practitioner in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, and amazingly, he's been with this Wolper Wellbeing program for 18 years, and that's a credit to him and a credit to Wolper. So welcome, Dr. Schell.
Thanks very much, Julie, and thank you very much for the many people who've joined us tonight. Wolper has been around now for nearly 60 years, and part of our program is always to be, yes, we'll look after you well in hospital, which we do. However, we'd like to do some preventive health, give you some understanding of other health issues besides just being in our hospital after an operation or being well looked after for physical therapy. Of course, the immune system that we're going to talk about tonight is not just one system. It does depend on a lot of our other systems. And with that, we have three wonderful people on our panel who will talk about some of those issues through Julie in a Q&A type of setup where we'll introduce each other, then we'll talk about matters, and we'll have quite an opportunity to answer many of your questions. And in fact, in the discussion between Julie and our panelists, I'm sure some of your questions will actually be answered. So as we're all waiting around for this wonderful COVID-19 vaccine to come along and cure us all of this terrible dilemma that we're in, we do have to look after our immune system. And there are many systems that are going to support it. So without further ado, I'd like to say thank you very much to Julie and to our three panelists for coming along tonight, and for everybody at Wolper helping put this together. So sit back and listen. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen, and we'll look forward to you popping back on our screen in a moment. And we have two professors and a PhD graduate with us tonight. For the professors, I've just popped that little teddy bear in the background to represent academic achievement. Just before we introduce our panel, we want to know more about you who are watching tonight. And so we're going to do a poll. We've got 4 questions. I'll ask our man in cyberspace, Jackson, to put up a question. Here's our first one. If you could tell us your age, I'll just be quiet while you quickly tick what age group you fill in. Now, I think we'll come to the answers now, and hopefully people have clicked on their numbers. Let's see the age range who are with us so far. We have, I'll just get those answers up. So just looking there, we have 12% over 80, 36% 71 to 80, 34% 61 to 70, and 11% 51 to 60, and we have a number of people between 40 and 50, and someone who's joined us after 30 and after 20. So thank you very much. We'll go to our next poll question now. Will you have the COVID-19 vaccine when it becomes available? If you could answer that, please. Let's go to the answer, Jackson. 71% have said yes, 26% maybe, and 3% no. Thank you very much. Let's go to our third question. How much do you spend on supplements each month? Things you buy at the chemist to enhance your health in your view. How much do you spend on supplements each month? The answers now, please. So we have 12% over $60, 28% over $31, 31 to 60, 44% up to 30, and only 16% are not using supplements. Our next question, and our final question, is multiple choice. You can choose more than one. Are you currently struggling with one or more of the following? So fill in as many as you like. And we'll go to the answers, please. Lack of or unsettled sleep, 64%. Lack of exercise, 39%. Stress or anxiety, 46%. Loneliness, 15%. Comfort eating, 39%. Eating unhealthy food, 22%. Excess alcohol consumption, 4%. So Jackson, I'll ask you to take them off the screen, and thank you so much for answering. I should have indicated to you, in fact, I'll just quickly tell you our basic housekeeping again, as a number of more people have joined us. You can ask questions through the Q&A function at the bottom. Just click there, put your questions. We can't see you or hear you. Coming up to us through the questions is the way we know what questions you want to ask. We won't use the chat function. All questions will be anonymous, so you can be completely frank in your questions or any comment that you may wish to make. And we have a question moderator, Dr. Alan Schell, whom we met earlier, who will be moderating the questions and bringing them to us. And we won't be able to get to all questions, but we're going to do our best. Look, let's get on with it now. Let's meet our panel. And to discuss boosting your immune system, never more important than now, it gives me great pleasure to welcome to our screens Professor Stuart Tanguy, Professor Catherine Samaras, and Dr. Joanna McMillan. And welcome to you with interesting backgrounds. What I'll do, if I may, I'll just give you a quick background on each of them, and when I come to speak to them, I'll remind you who they are. So Professor Stuart Tanguy, if you wouldn't mind waving to us, is a Principal Research Fellow at the Garvan Institute of Medical Research. He has his own research laboratory, and he focuses on human immunology, cell biology, and immune deficiencies. He has over 200 peer-reviewed articles. He's involved in an editorial role in 3 journals, and he's a conjoint professor at St Vincent's Clinical School of Medicine at New South Wales. How we clap or welcome people is the deaf sign language, so if others could do that. Could I also welcome Professor Catherine Samaras, who's a senior staff specialist in the Department of Endocrinology at St Vincent's Hospital. She's also the director of the Australian Centre for Metabolic Health at St Vincent's and the theme leader of Healthy Aging at the Garvan Institute for Medical Research. And Catherine is involved in both the treatment of people with diabetes and also the prevention and treatment of obesity, and I think prevention of diabetes as well, and I'm hoping to achieve that in the course of our session this evening. So a welcome to Professor Catherine Samaras. And finally, our third panel member, Dr. Joanna McMillan, who's an accredited practicing dietitian. She has a PhD in nutrition science, a regular media commentator in all forums, and she's an ambassador for a number of non-government organisations, but including Diabetes Australia. So welcome very much to you, Joanna. So look, let's begin. I'd like to come to Professor Tanguy, if I may, because you're Mr. Immunology, as far as I'm concerned. What is the immune system? We're going to find out whether we can boost it in a minute, but what is it?
Thanks, Julie, and thanks everybody for joining us this evening. Well, your immune system, it's one of the many biological systems in your body, and it's really our armed forces. It's there to protect us against invading enemies, which is essentially all different types of microbes. So bacterial infections, viruses, fungi, parasites, all those, nasties, which we hear about, germs and so on, which live around us. We can't get away from them. Some of them even live on our skin and inside our bellies. But the immune system there is really to keep all of that potential harm at bay. So there's lots of different types of cells. They circulate in your blood. They sit in different types of tissues. They have lots of different functions, but they all work together, like very coordinated, defense forces to protect us and to keep us healthy. Now, of course, it doesn't always work that way. We can be overwhelmed with infection, but the immune system is incredibly robust and incredibly flexible in conquering the enemy, and in that way sort of builds up the reserves so that we can remain healthy and protect ourselves when we come across that same infection later on. And that's, of course, how vaccination works. So it's a very complicated system, but it works incredibly well. And of course, without it, you're incredibly prone to infection, and they can be often fatal, if not life-threatening. But on the other hand, it's a very thin edge of the wedge, because if you have too much immunity, you can develop autoimmune diseases. And there's more than 100 autoimmune diseases. And these are things like diabetes, type 1 diabetes at least, but systemic lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, type 1 diabetes, multiple sclerosis, Graves' disease. The list goes on and on and on, colitis and so on. These are all diseases which are caused by overactive immune system. So it's very easy to become unwell if your immune system's ramped up a little bit too much, or it doesn't have quite enough in it to protect you from infection.
I'll just ask you one more question before I meet another member of the panel. Because COVID-19 is on our minds, and I suppose I was a little surprised at the proportion of people who were only thinking maybe in terms of the vaccine. I don't know if you wish to reflect on that, or perhaps Dr. Alan Schell I might come to you in a moment, Alan, but as a working GP. But is there anything we've learnt about the immune response to COVID? What do we need to know about that, and what is the urgent need that the world needs in relation to that to give us a fighting chance?
That's a great question, Julie. And I must say, the scientific research community, and I should say I'm a scientist, not a clinician, for the scientific community has really come together over the last 8 months, and has been very proactive in sharing a lot of information that they're discovering through their studies. And this is one of the areas which has been, or is being, studied incredibly rigorously, and that is characterizing what the immune response is like in people who have acute viral infection. So simplistically, the way your immune system is responding to COVID-19 is pretty similar to how it responds to any other respiratory infection, whether it be influenza or some other types of garden variety infections. Of course, I'm not saying influenza is garden variety in terms of benign. So it doesn't do, it's not like your immune system is not doing something it should. All the typical features that we look for to say, yes, this person is responding are there. But the thing about immunity is that it develops over time. And I guess now we are 8 or 9 months out since the pandemic started at the end of 2019. So we're starting to get a little bit of a better picture of how long that immunity lasts. So to put this into context, some vaccines or some infections, once you recover from them or once you respond to them, you can have lifelong protection. So smallpox vaccine, the polio vaccine, these are ones which give you almost lifelong protection. You only have to get infected once, or fortunately these days, vaccinated very early on, and you'll have protection for decades. But then there's other vaccines like the diphtheria or tetanus toxin, which we famously know you have to get a booster every 5 to 10 years. And that's because your immunity wanes a bit, not to life-threatening levels at all, but it doesn't last for as long as some other ones. And that's what we don't know about COVID-19 yet. We don't know what the longevity of immunity in a healthy person is. There's been a lot of studies suggesting that one part of the immune response wanes quite quickly, which is problematic in the context of the vaccine development, because that is what's called the antibody response. And that's typically what enables vaccines to be successful. But again, it's still quite early days, and that's somewhat of a contentious finding. So we're still learning about the general robustness and longevity of the natural immune response to SARS-CoV-2 virus infection. Having said that, there can be some differences between the way the body responds to a natural infection versus vaccination. And that's because we can change the way the vaccine is delivered to the body, as opposed to a natural infection, which may be through aerosol drops or through, treading on a rusty nail if you were to get tetanus, for example. So there are ways we can tweak the immune system a bit in the context of vaccination, which may make the response a bit different to natural infection. But we're seeing a lot of data, a lot of information, and there is certainly hope that a vaccine will be successful. But whether it will be one of those vaccines which will be lifelong, or whether you need to get a booster every 5 to 10 years, or maybe even every season, like the influenza vaccine, any vaccine that has some effect will be better than none.
Look, thank you so much, Stuart. And Catherine Samaras, can I come to you for a moment, or do you need to disappear for a second for technical reasons?
No, I think I should be fine for the next 10 minutes, and then I will shift.
Okay, well, I might just come to you now, and then we might let you disappear to do something technical. And just a reminder, Professor Catherine Samaras is the director of the Australian Centre for Metabolic Health at St Vincent's. Can I just ask you, why are you here? What is your the relationship of your work preventing diabetes and obesity? What is the link between that and our immune systems, and whether we can improve it or not?
Okay, so the immune system runs on fuel, and body fat and body glucose really fire up the immune system hugely. So as Stuart said, many of our tissues are full of immune cells, and one tissue that is very full of immune cells, and these really drive a lot of aspects of our immunity and our metabolism, is fat tissue. So don't think of fat tissue as just like an inert reservoir, an inert bank of just fat. It's got a rich network of capillaries. It's got lots of immune systems, and these can direct fuel around the body. And if you're carrying a lot of extra fat tissue, and if you've got a high sugar diet, it primes the immune system to act in an autoimmune kind of way. So we did some research some years ago that showed that very overweight people with diabetes have this very, very highly wired up immune system with the kinds of cells that actually promote inflammation throughout the body. And this inflammation can occur in the liver and in the arteries, in the joints. And increasingly we understand that sort of inflammation is involved in the brain and promotes cognitive decline, and with the end result of dementia. So we're very, very worried about that excess immune system effect on systemic inflammation. And what we showed a number of years ago is, okay, people with diabetes have that, but if you calorie restrict and you lose even a modest amount of weight, and we're talking about just a 5 to 6 kilo difference, you could actually reduce some of those really aggressive immune cells that are pro-inflammatory by about 80%. So it was a very, very significant finding. And there had been some work in people with rheumatoid arthritis showing that just fasting people with rheumatoid arthritis would reduce their inflammation to a similar sort of level. So systemic inflammation is something that everybody worries about in the birth of diabetes and heart disease and liver disease and autoimmunity. And you can actually change that through diet and calorie restriction and losing a few of those extra kilos if you happen to have them.
Could I ask you one more question, and then I'll let you go and change your computer, and I'll have a word with Joanna, our dietitian, and we'll go to our questions just to let our audience know what we're doing. I watched a television program on SBS or the ABC this a couple of nights ago, which followed two twin doctors in the United Kingdom one of whom, I don't know if you saw it, Alan, he's nodding, but one of whom had COVID-19 and was recovering, but it was discovering it was causing tremendous damage to his heart. And his brother, twin brother, was an accident emergency physician in a hospital, and he basically did ward rounds with us in the ICU there, and we met COVID-19 patients. So I'm just giving you the context, but everyone kept talking about inflammation. And I just noticed you're talking about inflammation. This is an absolute layperson's question, but is part of what's causing such terrible illness with COVID-19 inflammation? And if so, how is it? Can you just help us understand that? You know, I'm basically asking, why are people getting so terribly sick with this COVID-19, and is inflammation part of it?
So, Julie, you're absolutely right. It's that inflammatory response to the virus, the way our immune system aggressively attacks the virus, that is actually doing all the damage to the body. So, for example, the lung disease, the kidney disease, the stroke, they're all reactions by our immune system really targeting those body organs and causing the damage. So if you like, those things are the innocent bystanders from a very aggressive immune response in attacking the virus. And this is why one of the first trials that showed an effective treatment was actually cortisone, dexamethasone, and that is something that suppresses the immune responses. And so, you know, some of the supposed therapies like Plaquenil or hydroxychloroquine, which was talked about, and we had famous presidents kind of talking about this drug, that is also an immune system drug. It hasn't been so helpful, but some of the other medications that have been shown to help with the COVID infection are actually things that downturn, that wind down the immune system response. So some of the antiretroviral agents that are used to treat HIV, some of the other very strong medications are actually something that just dial down the immune response. Now, we're all waiting for antibodies, we're all waiting for the vaccination, but the therapies that we do have are mostly to support the body systems, but the damage is actually coming from the immune system.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm dying to come back to Stuart, but I'll go to Joanna because I want to bring in our audience, but we'll return to everything you've said, and we might bid Catherine farewell while she changes computer for a moment. So it's my pleasure now to welcome Dr. Joanna McMillan, our accredited practicing dietitian. And you know, the people, I'm sure, have tuned in because they want to give their immune system the best chance possible. It's called, our session is called Boosting Your Immune System. What do you think of that language, boost? Because I think you think support may be better, but I guess my fundamental question is, what can we do to give our immune system the best possible chance? One, to resist COVID-19 if we're unlucky enough to get it, but also to resist all the other conditions we don't want.
Well, I think Catherine actually really led nicely into what I was going to say, because what's very important is the reason I objected to that boosting your immune system is that we don't necessarily want that. One of the problems for patients with COVID-19 who are having a very bad time with the disease is because their immune system is overreacting. So we don't necessarily want a boost. We want our immune system to act appropriately, but we don't want it to be overreactive, in which case you get too much inflammation, you get too much of this kind of response. And so what I talk about with nutrition is that nutrition is very much involved in terms of supporting your immune function. I want to say straight up front, there is an awful lot of nonsense on the internet at the moment about supplements or particular foods or so on that can prevent you from getting this virus or make it easier for you to beat this virus. Food is very, very important in terms of making sure you are healthy enough to be able to support your immune system, to have your immune system react appropriately. And we were talking there about, I think Stuart was talking about where the immune system cells are in your body. A lot of your immune system, some 70% or more, is in your gut. So we know there's this interaction of the microbiome, which is a huge research area of mine. So yes, food is intricately involved, but it's important not to see it as something, and neither if you get COVID-19, by the way, does it mean that it's any reflection on your diet or lifestyle choices. Some of us are just going to get the bad card here. But I guess my main message tonight is to let you know that nutrition very much is involved in making sure your body is strong enough to hopefully be able to get through this disease if you do get it. and not just this disease, but coughs and colds and flus and other things that come along during this time of year. And that's what's really important about nutrition. And also just to reassure people that at the moment, while so many of us are at home, it's also about how do we stay as healthy as we possibly can. And so really that's what my role is here tonight.
And if you were going to give 3 takeaway messages about nutrition tonight that you want people to remember, and I did note we are skewed older as a group, because I'm wondering where exercise fits in. If you're a much older group, I'm 66 in a month, and I'm not quite as brisk when I walk as I used to be. So what are the 3 or 4 we recommend you do this to give your immune system the best chance of acting appropriately, whatever happens to you?
Well, I would really say, my work is largely in what we now term as lifestyle medicine, which is really about how diet and lifestyle choices, including our exercise and activity choices, influence our health. And so it's very much the area of, I always think it's a funny term, preventative health, because it's really preventative illness, but you all understand what I mean. So it is really about how can I make my body as strong as possible to get the most out of life and make me as strong as possible to be able to fight whatever diseases or other things infections come my way. So that is essentially what lifestyle medicine is about. And I like to think of it as 6 pillars. That's what I talk about. And those are food and drink, which I don't just mean alcohol, I mean also coffee, tea, and water and other things. So food, drink, activity, exercise, sleep, and stress. And all of those interact. So often what I talk about is, particularly at the moment, I was noticing in the poll, lots of you said that you were feeling stressed or you're feeling anxious. That has a really big impact on the way that you're eating. Of course, it has an impact. I also noted a lot of you said you're not sleeping well, you're struggling to sleep well. Stress has an impact on sleep. Actually, age has an impact on sleep too, and our sleep patterns can change as we get older. And then when you're tired, of course, you're less able to deal with stress. You feel less like exercising. You're perhaps turning to the wrong kinds of foods as an energy pick-me-up. So you start to see how all of these things are overlapped. So, sorry, Julie, you've asked me for 3 things and I just complicated matters. But essentially the bottom line is, we want to eat well, but don't overcomplicate. I think there's a lot of extreme diets and nonsense diets out there. It's about eating whole foods. It's about trying to exercise and move more. And it's about managing sleep and, getting enough sleep and managing stress. I would say those are my really key 3 points.
Thank you so much. And what I'd like to do now, if I may, is come to Alan Shell. And Alan, just before you come to the first question, would you like to comment on what we learnt about the audience at the beginning there? Any observations? And I'm just going to let my dog out the door while you do it. I'll be straight.
Okay, no dogs here. So tonight, we certainly have over 51s representing most of the community. Those below the age of 50 at this point in time were, out of 150 people who answered questions, were only at 7%. So the vast majority are sort of in the 60 to 80 group. And most of them in Sydney, and thank you those in Melbourne for joining us again. We certainly understand that it's a bit tough in Victoria, and we hope that we can help you there tonight. I think that the other one that Joanne was talking about now is that, in fact, 64% of the people out of about 200 who answered the question, in fact, had an issue of unsettled or lack of sleep, which is very high, and 46%, which is equally high, stress and anxiety, and then took to comfort eating, which is often something that people say they do when they're stressed. Happily, our group of people don't drink a lot of alcohol, or not causing that to be excess alcohol consumption, which is a very interesting answer. And I think back to the other one in the polls, which I think is significant, is that while 16% said they didn't take any supplements, we had approximately 80% or 72% of 200 people who said they spend anywhere between $1 and $60 a month, which in essence is they're taking their prescription drugs and probably taking a supplement as well. And spending more than $60, there was 12%, which is quite a large number, I'd say. And they're probably taking other medicines that they may have been given from their GP. So with that in mind, a lot of the answers that Joanne has given is that we need to look at what we eat, and Catherine has said the same. And it's interesting with COVID that people who have diabetes and obesity unfortunately do very badly with this particular disease. And again, on from what Stuart has said about that inflammatory reaction and having those other two major comorbidities. From questions, we've already got quite a few, and I think that we'll let you ask a few more questions, and I'll come back to what some of the people are asking. One in particular is, I eat well, do I really need supplements? And that also goes for vitamin D, because there's also been some talk about mega dose of vitamin B, in fact, can be a very big negative, and anything mega certainly would do that. So I'll leave you with those couple of points of view.
And thank you. And I'll welcome back Catherine Samaras and come to you on that, if I may. I've got two questions I want to ask you. One is about supplements, and one is about the connection between being overweight and being elderly, and why we're more at risk from COVID-19, and does it apply to other illnesses? Can I just come to the supplements first? Are there any supplements that can help our immune system? That's what our theme is tonight. What would you say to that?
So yes, vitamin D can help the immune system. People who have higher vitamin D levels, not too high, not mega doses, but people who have higher vitamin D levels actually don't have an overreactive immune system. And remember, a lot of the adverse effects we're seeing with this virus in the illness is the immune system overreacting. And so we know that people with very low vitamin D levels have an overactive immune system. There have been a number of studies using vitamin D in autoimmune diseases. The best data come from multiple sclerosis, but it's also been shown with rheumatoid and with SLE. It helps dial down the immune system. People kind of talk about echinacea and preventing infections. The actual evidence for things like echinacea is a big round zero. So I think that's money down the drain if you're spending that. People who get a lot of sun, who play golf and who play tennis and who garden a lot, as long as you're not covered from head to toe, you'll get enough vitamin D. But if you're somebody that needs to put on lots of 50+ sunscreen because of skin cancers or because of sun damage to the skin, then maybe a vitamin D supplement is necessary.
And could I ask you, the link between weight or fat, you gave a description of fat before that I hadn't heard it put in those terms. And I suppose I was left with the impression that if our theme is about what can I do to help my immune system, losing weight is a very good idea. Is it as simple as that the thinner you are, the better your immune system works, or is that going too far?
It's probably going a bit too far, because there is a sort of a tipping point under which if you go too low in weight, that's actually not good for you. But if you're carrying extra kilos, let's say you're carrying an extra 5 to 10, 30 kilos, then you need to lose some of that weight, and the immune system will be calmer and there won't be so much inflammation around the body. So yes, you do need to lose some weight if you are carrying lots of extra kilos. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to reach normal or healthy weight. Just that 5 kilos, 6 kilos difference will make that difference to the immune system being overactivated, and it will settle the inflammation down in the body. But you can get too thin. And so if you start to get malnourished, then there are a whole lot of actual immune things that happen. So if you're really underweight, the body won't make antibodies. You waste your protein stores. And so your immune system is then actually compromised and unable to mount enough immune response if you get too thin. And I see this happen to cancer patients who just think, oh, I'm going to go on one of those, sugar-free diets. And they lose so much weight that they're almost cachectic, and then they're really vulnerable in terms of their immune system. So there is that balance.
I've had cancer, so I've heard that word, cachectic. Is that how you pronounce it? But can you just explain what that means?
Yeah, so cachectic means when you're so thin that you're gaunt. Okay, so some people just get too thin. And, sometimes I joke that people have kind of, survived cancer and the chemotherapy, and then they inflict this grueling diet upon themselves that they actually, they look like they're coming out of a famine. And that's just going too far. And that's cachexia. It's just when you're skin and bone.
Stuart, Professor Tanguy, Stuart Tanguy, can I come to you? And I thought I'd ask both you and Catherine the same question, and then again come to Joanna for the practical takeout of what we need to do to give ourselves the best chance. But the question is, why are older older people with more weight, and particularly obese people, more vulnerable to COVID, and are they vulnerable to other conditions as well?
Yeah, that's a really fascinating observation, because we know typically with something like influenza, we often worry about the at-risk populations being the elderly, of course, but also young kids, pregnant women, and so on. But that doesn't seem to be the case for SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19, which is just fascinating from a biological perspective. So, as Kathy has highlighted, a number of conditions, what we call comorbidities or pre-existing conditions, diabetes, obesity, even high blood pressure, hypertension, cancer, these can all be risk factors for severe COVID-19. From an immunological perspective, we certainly know that just like every other aspect of aging and all your other systems, your immune system does start working a little bit less efficiently with age, and the ability for your body to generate the right numbers and the right types of immune cells does decline with age. And that's what's called immune senescence. So basically your immune system is just, sort of running out of steam a little bit. So that could certainly be one contributing factor, is that just by nature of longevity, that your immune system is not as sharp as what it would be in, youngsters. And we know remarkably that whilst clearly we see this huge spike in mortality and severity with each decade beyond 50 and 60, for example, it's not because that demographic is more susceptible to infection, because almost the same proportion of people in their teens, 20s, 30s, 40s are infected with the COVID-19 virus. It just presents much more severely in the elderly. So it could be something to do with, like, your immune system is aged and a little bit tuckered out, which may be problematic in the setting of vaccination as well, because we know the elderly is often encouraged to be vaccinated more frequently against some other infections. Whether aging is risk factor for other conditions, I'm sure Kathy could answer that more professionally than I could, but I suspect that probably is the case.
Did you want to answer that, Catherine?
So people with diabetes and obesity are more at risk of this cytokine storm, which is this overactive immune response to the COVID virus, just because they've got this hyper-primed immune system, deposited, sitting in their fat tissue. So remember, there's so many fat cells in this, wonderful reservoir of fat, and they're just sitting there waiting. And suddenly there is this terrible virus, a primed immune system, bang. So that's part of the reason why, age is the biggest risk with COVID infection. People over the age of 80 have something like a 60% chance, a 66-time higher chance of dying from the virus. And next down the list is being obese, which increases the risk of dying by the six-fold times. So, and diabetes closely after that. So it's that overactive immune system that seems to be explaining what we have seen in overseas.
And what?
Can I just add something to that, Julie? Just observationally, Kathy's spot on there, that these conditions where you have exaggerated immune response, in the case of, for example, autoimmunity, certainly doesn't help. And anecdotally, there's been studies reporting for people who have had organ transplants, so people who have had heart, lung, liver transplants, they're often immunosuppressed. They're on lifelong medication to stop rejection of that tissue. So there were some studies in Europe, because there was concern that those patients would be at risk because they might be immunosuppressed. So some big transplant centers in Europe looked at this and in fact found that people who were immunosuppressed, because they were on particular drugs, this was previously, and who became virus positive, actually were fine. So sort of turning down the immune system actually was beneficial, paradoxically almost. And that's possibly the same in the context of other autoimmune disease. And as I think Kathy said, Plaquenil is used to treat lupus because of that reason. It does turn the immune system down a little bit.
So it's quite sorry, I'll just come to Alan if I may. Thank you, Alan.
That was actually a very good question asked by one of our attendees tonight. that the immunosuppressed are asking, can I boost my immunity if I'm immunosuppressed? In fact, what you're saying is that it's the reverse here. There's actually a benefit, in a way, to be immunosuppressed, or the anti-inflammatory with the dexamethasone, same thing. So we're in a very bit of a bind. So it comes down to Joanne then maybe answering that question of, does the microbiome help our immune system? In other words, we talk about gut, fecal transplant. People are taking tablets of somebody else's, intestinal matter. So does the gut biome play a part in this, particularly where we know that in my day, and many of the attendees tonight will have had a salk vaccine to start with, which they found wasn't as good as taking oral polio, which, as we now know, is almost eradicated. So for the anti-vaxxers, we've, except for Afghanistan and Pakistan, we've almost knocked out polio completely. So back to the gut biome, the microbiome, is that actually going to be helping? We'll go away from the autoimmune, the immune suppressed people, to now look at our own immune system through the gut biome, please.
So I'll come to Catherine, if I may, and then to Joanna.
So the microbiome is fascinating, and there's more diversity of the different bacteria within our gut than there is in all of the cells in our body. And the balance of the good bacteria versus the bad bacteria in our intestine actually makes a huge difference, because if you were to lay out just your small intestine onto the ground, and because it's made up of all of these folds like this, so it's a bit like Switzerland, but if you were to lay it all out, just our own gut has the surface area of a whole tennis court. And just if you imagine that tennis court, underneath, like just a millimeter underneath the surface, is this rich network of blood vessels. Now that's full of red cells, but it's also full of immune cells. And there is communication between what's inside the gut and those immune cells. So when you have too many of the bad bacteria, they wire up the immune system so that there is more systemic inflammation. So there's a study we've been doing at the Garvan in people with a newly diagnosed immune condition, where we alter the gut microbiome through diet, just completely through diet, with prebiotic foods. And we've actually shown, but not published, but what we've shown is that you can actually dial down those pro-inflammatory cells just through interfering with the gut microbiome, not with medications, just with food you buy, at the fruit and vegetable market. And so the gut microbiome, that balance is really important. Now, you can upset your microbiome by eating takeaway food, by high sugar foods, by having antibiotics more than you need to. That will really change the microbiome, and it gets rid of everything but the bad guys proliferate first. But you can grow the good microbiome. The fecal transplant is one way. Most people find that quite unpalatable, I must say. But you can change it through diet. So I'll hand over to Joanna, because I'm sure she'll have lots to say here.
Yes, could I ask you, Joanna, and obviously you say what you wish to say, but if I, as a member of the audience who is overweight, who has had, some illnesses that have, and treatments that have weakened my immune system, I am hoping to get from tonight some action steps to improve my chance of surviving this period of history. So your reflections on the microbiome and generally what we should be doing.
Well, look, this has been a big area of my research life over the last couple of years. So Catherine's laid that up really nicely for me. What's interesting to me about the microbiome is that this is essentially, in my mind, it's scientists now, we're being able to work out why some of the influences that we've long seen of diet on health, both physical and mental health, it's as if the microbiome is now providing some of those answers. So when I first studied nutrition science, there was a lot of things that we said, oh, eating this particular way seems to be really good for mental health, but we don't really understand why. Eating this particular way seems to be really good for our immune system, but we don't really understand why. So to me, the microbiome research, which I've got to say is still in its infancy, and if you're panicking about getting a fecal transplant, you're probably not, I'm not going to advise you to do that yet. Unless there is only one clinical condition, which is a particular infection with something called C. difficile. And it is really the only clinically tested, I mean, something like 90-something% of patients are cured with a fecal transplant if you're not cured for C. difficile with antibiotics. But for things like diabetes or autoimmune diseases, or for inflammatory bowel diseases, there are some research trials underway. So look, we might be in a situation where it's an interesting treatment in the future. But at the moment, no, it's not recommended for most people. It really is a fairly crude process. I've seen it done. I've even done an interview with a doctor doing it, which was possibly my strangest interview on television. So I don't recommend that.
Put aside the poo matter and come to what most of us should be doing.
But what Catherine alluded to there was the most interesting thing about the microbiome is you can change it very quickly. Like within 24 hours, we can see changes in the microbiome simply by changing your diet. So that is a powerful message. The other thing, listening to you there, Julie, talking about, so people who are overweight, please rest assured that there is a lot that you can do. It's very, very difficult to lose a lot of weight and to keep it off. It's the keeping it off part that we know is very, very difficult. But rest assured that even if this has already been alluded to, that even just a very small amount of weight has very big health benefits. But even if you don't lose any weight, if you impact your microbiome because you're eating better, you're getting better nutrient intake, you're starting to get your better sleep, you're managing your stress, you're going for a walk every day, you're getting some social interaction, depending, I know we've got some Melburnians with us, our hearts are with you at the moment, but try to get as much social connections as you're able to, even if it's like we're doing tonight via Zoom. These things are all really important for the way that your body functions. So I think it's very easy for us to sort of go down that path of thinking it's all, oh my goodness, I can't do anything. I've got diabetes, I'm overweight, I've got comorbidities, but there's a lot that you can do to simply by eating better is one step that you can take in the right direction to already having a better immune response.
And when you say eating better, so I'll come to Alan, thank you.
So the question then is, why do people with high blood pressure also have an issue? And then we had a serious discussion about it, and I'm one of them, that you're on an ACE inhibitor, one of the drugs that we use in hypertension or managing blood pressure, and the fact that COVID has a high incidence in upsetting people who also have a blood pressure issue. Perhaps Professor Tangi can talk about that.
So, sorry, Alan, about the
issue with hypertension or high blood pressure, and also some of the medicines that may in fact be implicated in making the condition worse.
So I'm really not, as I said, I'm a scientist, not a clinician. So I feel a little bit out of my comfort zone answering clinical questions. But interestingly, the way the virus infects humans specifically is through a protein on cells, which is called the angiotensin converting enzyme number 2, ACE2, which is the target of a number of hypertension therapies. So the exact reason why hypertension is a cofactor, I'm not sure. I have seen, it seems a little bit controversial in some settings, because I know some people have commented that the incidence of hypertension in the general population, particularly in the elderly, is similar to the incidence of hypertension in people who are sick with COVID-19 as well. So I'm really not qualified to go too deep into that. Sorry.
Oh, thank you, Stuart. Well, I come to Joanna.
Well, I thought I'd just very quickly give you some very good news if you have high blood pressure. I reported on this study just the other day in media that a very good Australian study out of La Trobe University just reported that giving Australian extra virgin olive oil, which is very high in a particular group of plant compounds called polyphenols, that we actually, this brings us back to the microbiome because they're utilized or they're turned into more bioactive ingredients by the microbiome. These polyphenols that are present in Australian extra virgin olive oil particularly have a beneficial effect in lowering blood pressure. So that was just a really nice study giving us some positive indications in the way that diet can influence your health.
Well, certainly Michael Mosley and Professor Samaras also talk about taking a good dose of olive oil, Australian olive oil, every day. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, this study used, I think they used 4 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. And we know from some of the big studies from Europe, like PrediMed and some of the big Mediterranean diet studies, everything is giving us this indication of you need 3 to 4 tablespoons a day. But you've got to make sure that you get the extra virgin olive oil, not olive oil, because refined olive oils don't have these polyphenols. So I'm a big supporter of the Australian industry for that reason, because then you get your polyphenols.
Can I come to Professor Samaras? And I just want to clarify a few points here. First of all, just coming back to this question of blood pressure, there's been reference to ACE medications. Can you just explain what are the things we need to know about blood pressure and our immune system, blood pressure and COVID, and then what's the relevance of these particular kinds of ACE medications? Because there may be people watching us who are on them.
So the ACE, the link between hypertension and COVID actually came from the Chinese data we were seeing very early. And they were finding that people with hypertension had much worse risk of dying and being on a ventilator. And so there were thoughts that, oh, maybe because the virus, as Stuart talked about, comes in through one of these ACE receptors, that maybe these ACE inhibitors and angiotensin II blockers, which are very, very commonly used medications, maybe they're getting in the way or helping the virus enter. When they've looked at it, it's actually the opposite. Okay, so now that we've got a lot more data, which, you know, people have been able to scrutinize a lot more, you know, in the scientific world, they're actually thinking, and there are trials about to start, that actually being on an ACE blocker, because it blocks the receptor, may actually help people not absorb so much dose of the virus. So this is, the thinking has changed a lot. So in the very early days, there were lots of doctors thinking, I've got to get my patients off ACE inhibitors for their blood pressure. And that could potentially completely destabilize people's blood pressure control. But now we're actually thinking, no, it actually may be protective. So if you are on an ACE inhibitor or an A2 blocker for your blood pressure, don't think you should change them, because they may actually be protective. So I think rather than there being any anxiety, if you're on those drugs, it may actually be helpful.
Look, what I want to do is to come to each of you for a very quick, specific question, and then come to you, Alan, and we'll do more questions from the audience, please. And just before I do my quick, specific question, you've mentioned obesity as a risk factor for damage to the immune system. I just want to be clear, what is obese? Because I know I'm obese, and I don't think I look like I think I look like I'm fat, but I don't think most people would think I was obese. The threshold's quite low. So how do you explain what is overweight and what is obese to the average person?
So we use this measure of body mass index, or BMI, body mass index. And that simply is the weight divided by the height in meters divided by the height again. So if I was, 70 kilos and I was 1.65 meters tall, I would divide the 70 kilos by 1.65 and then divide that number again by 1.65. Now, healthy weight we define as body mass index 18 to 25, and being overweight as 25 to 30, and obese as being over the 30 mark. We also then talk about, the comorbidities, diabetes, hypertension. That's just the way the world does it. And there's lots of debate about whether that's the best way. Should we also be looking at the waist? Certainly if you're looking for heart disease risk, diabetes risk, knowing what your waist measurement is helps as well. But there's no kind of, the obesity cutoffs that we use are those BMI ones. So it's BMI more than 30.
Okay, look, thank you. So my question to each of you, and if you could be concise, I'd be grateful, and then we'll come to questions, is what are 3 things people should do to give to support or boost their immune system? And is there something they must not do because it's damaging to it? So 3 things to do that are positive and something to avoid like all hell. Do you want to go first, Catherine?
So the 3 things would be, number 1 to 2 pieces of fruit per day. Having vitamin C through diet, I think, is the best way. So 1 to 2 pieces of fruit per day. The second thing would be losing the 5 kilos if you are carrying the extra weight. The third thing would be if you're an indoor dweller like I am, in a room with no windows, and I go to work in the dark and come home in the dark, then some vitamin D. Or get plenty of sun on the weekends. So they would be my 3 things. The thing that I would not do is put the junk food in the bin, but don't pass through your intestinal system. So respect the gut microbiome, no junk food.
And how do you define junk food?
Anything that you haven't made.
unless you're going to a really nice restaurant and you think that their kitchen is using good quality oils, like Joanna talked about, you know, things made with fresh foods. Yeah.
Okay.
COVID has made us all cook, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, it has indeed. Thank you so much. If I could come to you, Joanna, 3 things to do and what to avoid like the plague.
I'm glad Catherine was already nicking my things in my head, so I'm so glad you came to me second. So, well, I'm going to say, first of all, eat plant foods. So you don't have to be vegetarian or vegan. There's definitely nutritional benefits. I eat meat and animal foods too. From a nutritional perspective, it's a good idea to include those things. But all of us, whether you eat animal foods or not, you absolutely need to eat plant foods. That's where you get the specific fibers that fuel those good bugs in your microbiome. So eat more plant food. That's the thing. And plant food, remember, doesn't just mean vegetables. It's vegetables, fruits, nuts and seeds, legumes, and whole grains. These are all plant foods. The second thing I'm going to say is get enough sleep. We know that sleep has a really big impact on your immune system, and lots of you have answered that you're struggling with sleep. So look, don't be scared of having the nana nap. We just need to rename that. If you rename it as the power nap, it feels a whole lot better. So you need to make sure that you're getting enough sleep. And there's lots of advice online as to how to improve your sleep if you can't do it. And the last thing is to get a little bit of activity. Now, Catherine also mentioned getting outside for vitamin D, but I'm going to reiterate that. Try and get outside for a walk. We're allowed to go out and exercise, even if you're in Melbourne and you're still in lockdown. You're allowed to get outside and exercise for a period of time. That's really important for your mental health. Yes, it's vitamin D production in your skin, but it's also just so important for your stress levels and to be able to help you. Sorry, excuse me. That is my mum FaceTiming from Scotland. Let me just get rid of her.
No,
so those are my 3 things.
It's so important for your mental health.
It is.
Are you okay to come back to us?
It's okay. I've bumped my mum. She can wait until we're finished.
This is right to knock the mum back, but there you go.
She's in lockdown in Scotland, so you know she's clearly trying to do her social connect.
And what's something to avoid like the plague? What about in your own life? What do you avoid like the plague because of what you know?
I avoid like the plague junk food, because we know that junk food has a really, some of them work. From one of my colleagues is Professor Felice Jacka, who some of you may know. She's spoken out a lot in media recently about her work with the SMILES trial, which was all about how the Mediterranean diet influences your risk of depression and your management of depression. So she's at the Food Mood Centre down in Geelong. Well, she's done some really interesting work where she's shown, even if you're eating healthily, having junk food every week still influences your mental health. So that old adage of, oh, everything in moderation, that is my most hated term in nutrition, because it is not everything in moderation. Junk food in moderation is not okay. Junk food yes, if you have it once in a blue moon, it's going to be absolutely fine, so don't worry about it. But if you're having junk food on any kind of regular basis, even if it's once a week, it is still having an influence on your health. So that's what I avoid.
And how do you define junk food?
Well, I define junk food as foods that give me lots of kilojoules with very few nutrients. So, you know, yes, there are some takeout foods that you can get. You know, when I do want to order home delivery food, I order from my lovely local Thai restaurant where I can get a veggie stir fry, I can get brown rice, I can get a seafood stir fry, and I can get this, you know, closer. Yes, I don't know what oil they're using, and I hate to tell you, but it's usually horrible oil. But if I'm only having that once a fortnight or so, then that doesn't matter. What I define junk food are the fast food outlets. If food is very, very cheap, you've got to question, why is it very, very cheap? It's usually in a white bun. It's the wrong kind of oils. They're highly refined seed oils. There's very few plant foods. Everything is several steps away from the way that it appears in nature. So it's not giving me nutrients, and it's giving me lots of kilojoules. And it's usually very palatable. So it's kind of that moreish food that makes it. Do you remember that? I always think of that advert for Pringles, which was a type of chip, and it said something about when you pop, you can't stop. That's my definition of junk food. You can't stop eating it, and then you feel horrible an hour later. So it's that kind of moreish. It's scientifically designed to make you to want to eat more of it, and yet you then feel absolutely horrible later on.
So everything you're saying, Professor Samaras is nodding very, very intently. I'll just sort of say that. I want to come back to the oil question in a minute, but Professor Stuart Tangi, 3 things to do and what to avoid like the plague. And you can double up if you wish, but if you can find things, great.
No, so I absolutely echo the comments of Joanna and Kathy. So food, eating well, you know, big, bright, vegetables and fruits to get all those nutrients. Things that come as supplements are much better absorbed if they come naturally. So if you have big, lovely, big, colourful fruit and veggies. So eating well and exercise, I think, is really important. It does a lot. It's not just exercise. It gives you sunshine. It kickstarts your metabolism. It gets your heart beating in a good way, hopefully. It just sort of does everything it needs for. It's very good for your mental health. It's good for your physical health. It's good for your energy levels. It may be weight losing depending on your vigor of exercise. So that's really important. Sleep. I can tell you, I don't get enough sleep, and I would love to have more sleep. So, so I would think I'd be in a much better place if that was the case. So, eat. It sounds cliche, but it's almost, eat, sleep, and exercise are the key things. I mean, avoiding, it's those vices. It's those junk food certainly is one of them, but it's all those things which are just not good for you. Joanna, I know, don't mean to upset you, Joanna, by saying moderation, but, we did talk about alcohol in moderation and so on, but you'd have to be practical and sensible about what you're putting into your body. Essentially, we're talking about foods and vitamins and minerals and so on. You've also got to think, what else am I putting into my body, whether it be alcohol or smoking or whatever. It's all about health and well-being.
And can I come to you, Alan, and ask you a question, if I may, as a doctor, and then ask you for questions? But, this sleep issue, as a general practitioner, people must come to you all the time. And I note that we do have an older group, and many of us are reporting sleep difficulties. Have you seen people successfully improve their sleep? And if so, what are the must-dos? Well, tell us your story, please.
You ask my wife, I sleep very well. and I'd have to say that it's a pity that 39% of the people out of 200 said that they have a lack of exercise, because we have been doing more exercise, happily not in Victoria, and losing weight and eating better. So I would agree with all the comments made that is the first recipe for good sleep is to do regular exercise, to have a healthy diet. And of course, part of the issue around, stress and anxiety also play on people's minds. So, having so-called sleep diary and good sleep hygiene, where you're able to turn off either by reading a good book or not reading anything, certainly not watching exciting movies midnight and waiting to see who's going to kill whom, all those sort of issues. So it's really reassessing your lifestyle, planning your day. What can you do for tomorrow? So I think, and I have certainly over the years added exercise, and that's made a big difference. And looking after your own medical problems, because if they're balanced and you haven't got gut problems and your blood pressure's under control, of course you're going to feel better. And you can't expect that it's going to change tomorrow. So we talk about, how do I change my gut biome? Do I take more probiotics? And so it comes down to good oils, good food, regular exercise. And in the end, I think if you have a better sleep hygiene, looking at how you perhaps disrupt your sleep in the evening, worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow, etc., they're all playing on your disruptive sleep. I mean, that's the problem.
Alan, how on earth do you not worry about what's going to happen tomorrow at the moment in human history? If you've got children or grandchildren or,
I've got 4 beautiful grandsons. I do worry about them, absolutely.
Yeah, so I suppose it's the steps that we've, about dealing with anxiety, we need to, are all the things we're talking about.
We did. We had 4 great sessions and we had a very large audience. Our panel will not know that, but we had certainly large numbers talking about issues around anxiety in children, in adults, in older adults. And, we have an older group tonight. And for all of us, I think we are concerned about what's going to happen with the world tomorrow. I'm a bit disappointed that people are still saying they're not going to have a vaccine, maybe or not at all.
Come to that. Remind us the figure of the people who said maybe around the vaccine.
Yeah, so 71% out of 180 people said yes, 26% said maybe, and 3 said no. And if I look at it's an older age group, then I'm a bit surprised that some are saying maybe. But of course, we don't, and currently, of course, there's the COVAX, the group of people who are trying to do a world program for all of us. And there are issues that some people are trying to fast track it, and therefore there may be some side effects if we don't do it properly. So for all of us, we're going to have to wait for another year to see what the best one is for all of us. And like the influenza, which some of us have on a regular basis, that will give us some immunity. And the big question was, does physical distancing or social distancing actually decrease our potential for herd immunity? That's another quite a valid thing. It may stop us dying or not catching the disease, but it's actually compromising our herd immunity. You know, so this has raised huge questions.
So what I might do, if I may, is come to Catherine. If you're not talking, if you could turn off your microphone, I'd be grateful. But if I could come to you, Catherine, and for those who may have joined us late, at the very beginning, we did a number of polls with the whole audience, and one of them was about, would you take the COVID-19 vaccine when it's available? And this quite significant proportion of people said maybe, and a small proportion said no. 71% said they would. Your response to that question of, firstly, if people are wondering whether to take the vaccine when it's available or not, what your advice is there, and then also this question of social distancing and herd immunity.
I'll answer the last one first, herd immunity. So we've seen Sweden have an experiment with that didn't work. We're seeing wave.
Explain what it is, if you would.
But herd immunity is where enough people have the infection that everybody is covered, and then you'll have most people have had it, and then very few people will then be able to catch it and spread it to other people. But we know so far that the data suggests that there is no herd immunity. And in fact, we know of cases where people are getting reinfected with the virus and having it a second time. There are cases where people are not clearing the virus, so they're able to infect other people, you know, not just in that 2-week period when they get the virus, but, you know, some people holding on to the virus for 3 months after they've had it and potentially infecting others. And they've got to stay in isolation. So that this is all evolving. We're learning new things, you know, day by day. We read different things in, you know, the various journals about this. So I don't hold out for herd immunity based on what we've seen so far, which means there may not be a better day. And if people are happy to live in permanent isolation, then you can, and you cannot be vaccinated then. But it means you're going to have to live in a convent or somewhere where you're not going to be mixing with anybody and your food will be delivered to you. So, you know, you can go and find your own private island, I think. But I think, you know, in terms of, you know, which vaccine, when the vaccines start coming, I think we need to look at the trials. You know, I have some concerns about some countries who don't have the rigorous research and ethics protocols that other countries have. And one would have to look very closely at the data and look at which looks like the best vaccine for giving people immunity and has the lowest side effect profile. And so there are lots of different vaccines being trialled as we speak.
And Catherine, and I'll come to, do you want to go first? Could I just say my comment? I guess as an Australian with a fundamental faith in our health system, I have to be honest with you, I've survived quite a few things, and my mother had a million things and made it to 94. I suppose I feel we have systems in place that the vaccine that will be recommended by New South Wales Health or Vic Health will be one that will have been assessed by a range of appropriate clinicians and will be one that is the best in the world. Can I just get a quick comment from Catherine? Am I naive to think that?
No, I trust our systems.
Yeah,
I don't trust from far away, but I do trust ours.
So I personally was surprised that an audience of this nature, I've been involved for 7 or 8 years with this group, and it's a very health literate and an educated community. It's not all Jewish, but it's predominantly Jewish. I was surprised such a high number were saying maybe, and that's very interesting to me. But your comments, Stuart?
Oh, I was just going to reflect on the herd immunity concept, and as Kathy said, Sweden tried this. The UK were going to try this until the epidemiologists quickly clamped it down. But the other reality about herd immunity is you need to have a certain proportion of the population infected for herd immunity to work. So for something like measles, that has to be very, very high, like 95%. For SARS-CoV-2, it's calculated to be around 60 to 70% of the population being infected. Now we know now that the absolute numbers of people that are infected with SARS-CoV-2 is relatively low compared to the population. It's in the single-digit percentages or thereabouts. So to get to herd immunity, you need a threshold proportion of the population infected. And maybe we'll get that if we weren't social distancing, but the numbers you need to have successful herd immunity for this virus based on modeling is nowhere near what we've got at the moment.
So you're basically saying, and I'm coming to you next, Joanna, I'm sorry, but what I'm basically hearing from Catherine and Stuart is we need the vaccine. Unless
the only way you'll get herd immunity.
Isolation.
The only way you get herd immunity is by natural infection to a certain threshold or vaccination across en masse. Yes.
I'd just like to bring Joanna in and then I'll come back to you, Alan. Thank you.
I just wanted to comment on, I'm actually not surprised by those figures about vaccines, only because I'm a health professional who works a lot in the media. Essentially, a lot of my work is being a science communicator. And it worries me on the one hand that so many people are concerned, but the other hand is that I get very frustrated with the information that goes out in the media. So I just want to make an urge to you to please be careful who you're listening to in the media, because we have this free speech where anyone's allowed to say anything, anyone's allowed to post a blog, anyone's allowed to have a Facebook page where people follow and anyone can make their opinions felt. But not everyone has the qualifications behind them to make those claims. So I think there's a lot of confusion. That whole anti-vax movement is really driven by a lot of misinformation and myths and so on. So I think collectively we have to pull together. If this pandemic is doing anything, it is drawing us together. I can tell you from my work over a 25-odd year career here in Australia, where I work very closely with scientists and with medical professionals. We have an incredible research and medical community here who are working on both treatments and vaccines, as well as in the UK and other countries around the world. And so put your trust in those people, and please just be careful not to listen to the dissidents who are, for whatever reason, throwing spanners in the works and really upsetting it for everyone.
Look, thank you. We have about 10 minutes left before I'll be coming to you, Alan, to close up. So are there any other questions that are coming through that we haven't addressed in our remarks?
Well, it's a medical one, which relates, I guess, to our immune system. Does the hyperimmune plasma something, and stem cell transplants, are they going to be something? And the big question is, how do you boost your immunity? Well, here the people are trying hyperimmune plasma, which means we've got somebody else's plasma that says, well, they're immune, or their stem cell transplant. Maybe that'll boost our immunity. And in fact, is it an oxymoron to say, can we in fact boost our immunity?
Who would like to go first? Do you want to go first, Stuart?
I'll talk about the hyperimmune plasma. So firstly, this is not a new idea, as people would know. Basically, this is collecting blood from people who have recovered from viral infection. It's called convalescent plasma. And it's because it's collected from people who have recovered and are now convalescent. And the working idea is that in their blood, they have sufficiently high levels of these antibodies, which are soluble proteins, which can protect people from the virus. So it's like a blood transfusion in essence. You know, it's taking something from someone who has it and giving it to someone who doesn't or who needs it. But in this case, it's plasma. So it's basically passive immunization. So you're taking preformed antibodies that should recognize the virus and transfusing it into people who need it most. So this has been starting results from clinical trials, and not all clinical trials, some are just anecdotal observations, are coming out now. And the issue here is it's a short-term band-aid, essentially. It may prevent severity of disease if it's administered very early, almost prophylactically. So you'd be looking at healthcare workers, for example, would be a target audience, people in aged care facilities and so on. So those really target vulnerable populations at risk. So it only works for a very short period of time. Once it's given to people, it decays after about 3 weeks. So there's a narrow window for it to be effective in. The data is mixed, I must say. There doesn't seem to be an absolute game changer at this stage. And that's probably due to the timing of which has been administered. So the most convincing data looks like if it's given early, it's got some effect. But regardless, it's going to be short-lived because the proteins that they're putting into people are, in fact, themselves short-lived. They turn over and get broken down by the body naturally. So it's a bridge to something bigger and better, but it's certainly not going to be a cure-all for the long term.
Thank you. Could I come to Catherine for your response to that two-part question.
Well, I think Stuart's covered it better than I can. But on stem cell transplant, that's a huge deal, and that we do not use that to fight a virus. We do not use it to fight any kind of infection. So I think that's a different thing. That's more something for people with leukemia and other conditions, but certainly not this.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, certainly if you have for example, a genetic defect which compromises your immune system and you're unable to respond to any virus or any bacteria, you would have a life-saving bone marrow or hematopoietic stem cell transplant. And that could be curative, but that's not unique for SARS-CoV-2. That's something that would be standard of care and life-saving, and actually without it you'd die. But that's not unique to this situation.
Well, thank you. Alan, do you have other questions from the audience you'd like to bring forward?
Yes, the big one was, okay, red wine has polyphenols and phenols. How about a glass of red wine every night? But that was low on our list here. People don't drink much in my group of people.
Well, I come
Shall
to
I
you.
answer that?
Oh, Joanna, do you want to go?
Yeah, well, I only because I'm involved in Mediterranean diet research. So look, as part of the Mediterranean diet, absolutely red wine, a glass or two. With what's interesting when you look at the traditional Mediterranean diet, not necessarily what happens now, wine was always drunk with meals. So it's a glass or two with a meal. And that certainly seems to have some benefits. Yes, the polyphenols in the red wine can be of benefit. But just remember, it's very easy to go over the top and to be drinking too much. And then the alcohol itself has a detrimental effect. And also the only other thing I'll say about alcohol is just be aware of the way that alcohol influences all of those other things I've been talking about. So if you drink too much, it tends to impact your sleep. So it may help you to fall asleep, but it certainly doesn't help you to stay asleep. So if you're having that problem waking in the night, tossing and turning, think about what your alcohol intake is. It's certainly too much alcohol is bad for the gut. It's a gut irritant. So if you've got problems with your gut, that can be an influence. And then just recognize that sometimes when you drink, you perhaps lose your resolve to eat well. If you then sleep badly and you're a little dusty the next day, you don't then go and exercise. So there's this knock-on effect on these other aspects. So absolutely, if you enjoy a glass or two of red wine or whatever other drink that you like, that's absolutely fine. But just be aware of what those other influences are.
Hey, Catherine, do you want to respond to that issue of alcohol?
Yeah, I'd love to. Firstly, to clarify that the Mediterranean diet for women was to not drink any red wine at all. So if you look at traditional Mediterranean diets, the women don't actually drink much, and the men just do periodically, except perhaps for the Frenchmen who might drink, half a bottle a day. I'd like to recall what the healthy guidelines are for alcohol consumption, and they're a lot less than people think. Used to be just 1 to 2 standard drinks per day, with perhaps 2 to 3 alcohol-free days per week. This has now been reduced even more, and it's 1 standard drink for men and women, maybe 2 or 3 days per week. And really, to be very clear, a standard glass of wine is 100 mils. Most of us have got these voluminous glasses where you can easily pour a whole bottle into 2 glasses. And that's not what we mean by a glass. It's actually 100 mils, which is very small. And I agree with everything Joanna said about the potential adverse effects. And I see, most alcoholic beverages as empty calories that add to our waistline, especially when we're not moving very much.
Could I just ask a quick follow-up on that? When people talk about the Mediterranean diet, we tend to talk about, well, I tend to think about food, right? But I once did a walk on the Amalfi Coast over 4 days. And what I discovered was, and I gather this is similar in the Greek islands, that in the area of the Mediterranean, it's extremely hilly. So all those people with those good oils and other things that they grow, they're also like mountain goats. They walk up and down hills constantly. So when people talk about the Mediterranean diet, are they literally talking about eating, or do they factor in the exercise element of the hilly Mediterranean topography?
So there are several elements to that, because I completely agree with you, the physical activity. And then I think we also need to think about the religious fasting for a lot of these, communities that first showed how, the Mediterranean diet was actually associated with a much, much, much longer lifespan. And, you know, the Cretans, for example, amongst the longest living people in the world, and of course they make the best, one of the best olive oils in Crete, but they live on the most mountainous terrains. But if they were fairly, you know, orthodox in their religious beliefs, they'd be fasting for, you know, 200 days of the calendar year. And by fasting, I mean actually just having legumes and vegetables. So it's you know, really quite calorie restrained. So a lot of the thoughts around caloric restriction, energy restriction, and living longer is you know, I think has an excellent basis in epidemiology, and now has a very, very good basis in science as well. Just on you know, the exercise side, you're absolutely right. They're exercising very hard, but they've also, like a lot of older people that got through the war, there was, again, caloric restrictions. So we tend to think of that food. And I mean, one thing I would like to say about the Mediterranean diet is, if we're going, it's not about eating a lot more of everything that is so good for you. It's actually about not eating that much, because these people had privations, you know, a bit like we had rationing during World War II. I mean, the generations that have really long livers now got through the war, and they had rationing. So, you know, I completely agree with Joanna about more of those whole foods that are plant-based. And yes, olive oil is great, but it doesn't mean that you should be having half a litre of olive oil. You know, you still have to keep kind of a balance with not going overboard. And, you know, a lot of people eating buckets of kale are getting irritable bowel, because yes, it's a really good food and it's full of prebiotic, but too much of it can actually cause problems.
Look, Alan, I've just realised I've missed a fundamental question. Can I quickly ask it? And I hope we have time for one more from you as well. But I'll come to you, Catherine, and tell me, Stuart, if I should come to you. But I read an article that has indicated that men are having a higher death rate from COVID than women, and I realised we hadn't addressed that. Can I come to you first, Stuart, and then Catherine, just a quick response on that issue? Why is it so?
Yes, that's a fascinating question, actually. So one possibility is genetics, and there was a recent study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association that found, men have an X and a Y chromosome, and women have two X's. So there's a lot of sex-linked diseases. That's where you have the disease appearing in the males, but it's carried by females. So there was a study recently that identified, admittedly, only 4 individuals, but they were males, and they had a defect in a gene on the X chromosome, which made that gene not work so well. And it is an immune gene. It's very well known for its role in early activation of immune responses, particularly to viruses. So it's possibly an influence of genetics in that context, that the requirement for this particular gene is more important for protecting against coronavirus, for example, than other types of pathogens. So that is one real possibility. And I'm actually part of a global consortium called the COVID Human Genetic Effort, which is trying to answer these questions as well. Not just why are men more susceptible, but why are we seeing, for example, otherwise healthy young individuals suddenly get very, very sick. Whilst we do know that the age is a risk factor, and other disease risk factors, we'll still do see the outlier, who is that person who is otherwise very healthy but gets very sick. Or on the other hand, people who are elderly but are hyper-exposed to the virus and are actually well. So there's probably resistance genes as well as susceptibility genes. But to the specific question, we don't have a clear answer yet for the men, but this data from clearly a very small number of people, 4, but it's better than nothing, suggests there may be changes in our DNA, which is more expressed in men because they only have that one X chromosome. They don't have the backup that women have, and that could be a contributing factor.
Thank you. Catherine, a quick response from you, and I guess, does it mean that all the men watching this should be particularly taking all the advice that's been given?
Yeah, look, I think yes. And the other factor is that testosterone helps modulate the immune system. So there's some thought that maybe it's the testosterone in men that may be setting them up for, you know, a hyperactive immune system. Yes, I think, look, men shouldn't, you know, we often joke that testosterone makes you stupid, and, you know, all the women can now laugh. But, you know, I think one lovely aspect of men is that they have this idea that they are so resilient to everything. Now is a time for caution, and I think everybody should be sensible with this virus, and the best way is to follow the social isolation conditions that have been placed upon us, and not think that we don't have to wear masks in crowded places, or that we are impervious to this. I think, you know, men and women should both be smart and just be following everything that our public health people tell us about not catching this. It's not a pleasant virus. I've had about half a dozen patients with it, and it's not good. It's a bad virus. Bad.
Look, I'm going to hand back to Ellen now, and just as I do, can I tell you I've got this image all the way through this program this evening of, I've been lucky enough to go to Israel a couple of times in the last couple of years, and you know those magnificent Israeli breakfasts in the hotels where the whole side of the hotel has got tables on it, and there's one area that's intensely about pastries, and then there's another area, usually a little bit further to the right, that's got this amazing array of salads. And I'm thinking in my life, I've got to think of myself as having constantly been at an Israeli breakfast and head towards the things that grow. This is what I'm taking away, but I'll hand back to you, and thank you for having me. It's been absolutely informative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I agree that the Israeli salad's very famous, and it's a raw Mediterranean style of eating. And certainly, yep, good oils with it as well. White cheeses for your vitamin D. It's got everything, hasn't it? One of the best questions was the first one. Why is the doctors never ask their patients about their diet and what they're eating, as it's obviously a very important question. So for tonight, I think everybody listening, they should really be talking to their GP and to perhaps go and see an accredited and reliable local dietitian and look at their health, you know, and then look at their exercise, look at their sleep, and all the things we talked about. I mean, a lot of questions, but I think we answered a lot of them tonight. And I really can only say thank you very much to Julie, to our wonderful panelist Joanna, to Catherine and to Stuart, and to all of those who sent in very good questions. On Wolper's side, as we said, we want to keep in touch with you. We only use your email for letting you know about our functions. The next big event we have is going to be a very important one, which is on cognitive impairment and dementia. And from what we've talked about tonight, exercise, good sleep, and a good diet certainly reduce your risk of, don't stop it, but they're important things in maintaining a risk reduction and potential as we get older for developing dementia. And that's one of the topics I've been talking about to my GPs for many years. And becoming a friend of Wolper, it's free, and we like to stay connected with you and with our hospital for future events. So what can I say? Thank you very much to all of you who attended. We had over 271 and more people sitting there, so we were very well regarded this evening, and I can only say fantastic panel, and thank you very much, and we look forward to conducting another webinar very shortly. So thank you, Julie, thank you to my good staff helping out in the background, and thanks to Jackson, and have a very good night and stay well and stay safe, particularly those people finding it very hard down in Victoria.